The altar stone, 6 tons of ancient rock, was dragged over 466 miles from the far northeast of Scotland. No wheels, no horses, no explanation. And that's just the beginning. Because Stonehenge isn't just a mystery. It's a machine built from acoustic science, psychological manipulation, and stones so old they predate complex life on Earth. And nobody told you any of this in school. So here's what we actually know. Stonehenge took 1,500 years to build, involved people from across the entire British Isles, and may have been designed to physically alter your emotional state. 22 facts, all of them real. Most of them sound completely insane. 1. The altar stone's impossible origin. In 2024, geologists analyzed the mineral signature of Stonehenge's central 6-ton altar stone and found something that broke every existing theory. Its chemical fingerprint matched only one place on Earth, the ancient Orcadian Basin in northeastern Scotland, over 466 miles away. That's not a short trip. That's a multi-month maritime expedition through open ocean, navigating tides and coastlines with Neolithic technology. The stone wasn't dragged overland. It was almost certainly floated on boats, which means 5,000 years ago someone organized a sea voyage to retrieve a specific rock, and then somehow got it to Salisbury Plain. 2. The construction took longer than the Roman Empire lasted. Stonehenge wasn't built in a generation. It wasn't built in a century. Construction began around 3100 BC and continued in phases until approximately 1600 BC, a span of 1,500 years. The Roman Empire, for comparison, lasted roughly 500 years in the West. The people who started Stonehenge and the people who finished it were separated by more time than separates us from the fall of Rome. No single civilization, no single king, no single religion oversaw the whole thing. It was a project passed down across dozens of generations. And somehow, they kept going. 3. The stones ring like bells. The blue stones, the smaller inner stones transported from the Preseli Hills in Wales, produce a metallic ringing tone when struck. This isn't a coincidence. The region they came from in Wales is literally called Menclocog, which translates to ringing stones. Acoustic researchers have confirmed that these specific stones were selected, at least in part, for their sonic properties. Someone in the Neolithic period understood that certain rocks make certain sounds, and they carried those rocks 150 miles to build something that was meant to be heard, not just seen. 4. The interior was an acoustic trap. In 2020, acoustical engineer Trevor Cox and his team at the University of Salford built a 1:12 scale model of the original complete Stonehenge inside an acoustic chamber. What they found was extraordinary. The interior produced a reverberation of just over half a second, amplifying voices by 4 decibels and eliminating echo entirely. Sound made inside the circle stayed inside the circle, completely inaudible to anyone standing outside. The monument wasn't just a visual spectacle. It was a perfectly engineered sonic environment, a contained acoustic world where the voice of one person at the center could be heard clearly by everyone within the ring. 5. It was older than the written word when it was built. Stonehenge's first phase began around 3100 BC. Writing, specifically Sumerian cuneiform, emerged around 3200 BC in Mesopotamia, which means the people who started Stonehenge were essentially contemporaries of the very first humans to ever write anything down. They left no instructions, no blueprints, no explanations. Everything we know about Stonehenge comes from studying dirt, bones, and stone. The builders of one of humanity's most complex engineering projects never wrote a single word about why they built it. And that silence has lasted 5,000 years. 6. It was Britain's largest Neolithic cemetery. Excavations have uncovered the cremated remains of at least 63 individuals buried at Stonehenge, with deposits of human bone dating back to 3000 BC. But here's the twist. The cremated were almost equally men and women and included children. A 2018 strontium isotope study revealed that many of those buried there had likely traveled from near the bluestone quarries in Wales, dying far from where they were born. They weren't locals. They were pilgrims. People who came from hundreds of miles away and never went home. 7. The stones were moved without wheels. The sarsen stones, the massive outer ring, each weighing around 25 tons, were transported approximately 19 miles from Marlborough Downs. The blue stones came from Wales, 150 miles away. The altar stone from Scotland, 466 miles away. None of this was done with wheels, which hadn't yet arrived in Britain. Researchers estimate the entire construction required over 20 million hours of human labor. That's not a monument. That's a civilization-defining obsession, sustained across centuries by people who had every reason to stop and somehow never did. 8. The infrasound effect. Low-frequency resonance, infrasound, is produced by the specific arrangement of Stonehenge's stones. Infrasound sits below the threshold of conscious hearing. You don't hear it, you feel it. As a deep physical vibration that researchers have linked to sensations of awe, unease, sorrow, and fear. The blue stone's arrangement combined with the acoustic properties of the sarsen ring creates exactly this effect. Whether intentional or not, anyone standing inside the original complete Stonehenge would have experienced a physical, emotional response they couldn't explain, which, in a ritual context, would have felt exactly like the presence of something divine. 9. It was privately owned until 1918. For centuries, Stonehenge wasn't a national monument. It was someone's property. The Antrobus family owned it for years before selling it at auction in 1915 to a man named Cecil Chubb, who bought it on a whim. 3 years later, Chubb and his wife Mary donated it to the British nation. At a ceremony on October 26, 1918, just weeks before the end of World War I, Stonehenge was officially transferred to the Crown. One of humanity's greatest prehistoric monuments changed hands at an auction, and the man who bought it gave it away because he felt guilty. 10. The Druids had nothing to do with it. Modern Druids gather at Stonehenge every solstice, and the association feels ancient and inevitable. It's also completely wrong. Stonehenge predates the Druids by over 1,000 years. The connection was invented in the 17th century by antiquarian John Aubrey, who surveyed the site and incorrectly attributed it to Celtic priests. The myth stuck so hard that even today, Druid orders like the Ancient Order of Druids, founded in 1781, claim Stonehenge as their sacred temple. They're worshipping at a monument built by people who had been dead for 2,000 years before the first Druid ever existed. 11. It was never finished. Despite 1,500 years of construction, most archaeologists believe Stonehenge was abandoned before the original plan was complete. Gaps in the stone circle, incomplete alignments, and evidence of declining activity around the start of the Bronze Age all suggest the project was simply stopped. No catastrophe, no conquest, just a gradual fading of whatever cultural imperative had driven generations of people to keep building. The monument that has captivated the world for centuries may be an unfinished draft. The final version was never built. 12. The feast that started it all. In 3900 BC, over 800 years before the first stones were raised, a massive feast took place near the Stonehenge site. Chemical analysis of the remains revealed something remarkable. The participants were a mix of early farmers and hunter-gatherers, two groups with entirely different cultures, diets, and likely languages. They prepared their meat differently. They came from different places, and yet they ate together. Researchers describe it as one of the first moments in British history where groups from radically different backgrounds came together in one place, and the location they chose was Stonehenge. 13. The monument was a unification project. A 2025 study published in Archaeology International proposed that Stonehenge's true purpose was political as much as religious. The fact that every single stone came from a distant region, Wales, Marlborough, Scotland, makes it unique among over 900 stone circles in Britain. Researcher Mike Parker Pearson argued that the monument was deliberately built from stones sourced across the entire island to create a physical symbol of unity. The journey to bring each stone, potentially an 8-month undertaking, would have drawn thousands of people to witness and participate. Stonehenge wasn't just built, it was performed. 14. The solstice alignment is mathematically precise. On the summer solstice, The sun rises directly over the heel stone and casts its light into the exact center of the stone circle. On the winter solstice, the sun sets in the same precise alignment. This isn't approximate. It isn't coincidental. It required the builders to understand solar movement with enough accuracy to orient multi-ton stones across a 19-mile transport route and position them to within fractions of a degree. Neolithic people, without telescopes, without mathematics as we know it, without writing, engineered a solar calendar accurate enough that it still works perfectly today, 4,500 years later. 15. Charles Darwin dug holes here. In the 19th century, Charles Darwin visited Stonehenge as part of his scientific research. He wasn't there for the mystery. He was there for the earthworms. Darwin dug small holes around the base of the stones to study how earthworm activity caused objects to sink into the soil over time. His observations contributed to early understanding of how landscapes change across centuries. The man who explained the origin of species spent time at Stonehenge studying the dirt. And his findings helped explain why some of the stones had sunk several feet into the ground over millennia, slowly swallowed by the earth, one worm at a time. 16. The first aerial photograph was taken from a hot air balloon. In 1906, Lieutenant Philip Henry Sharp of the British military's Royal Engineers Balloon Section floated above Stonehenge and took the first aerial photograph of the monument. It was also the first aerial photograph of any archaeological site in Britain. For the first time in human history, someone saw Stonehenge from above, and the circular geometry that had been invisible from the ground suddenly became clear. The photograph revealed the monument's true scale and layout in a way that centuries of ground-level study had failed to capture. It took a balloon to finally see what the builders had always known. 17. The stones were originally painted, or were they? While Stonehenge's sarsen stones appear as raw gray rock today, some researchers have noted tool marks and deliberate shaping that suggest the surfaces were carefully worked and possibly treated. More striking is what surrounds them. The Stonehenge landscape contains hundreds of burial mounds, ceremonial pathways, and a processional avenue connecting the monument to the River Avon 2 miles away. The avenue was aligned to the solstice sunrise. Woodhenge and Durrington Walls, a massive Neolithic settlement, sit nearby. Stonehenge was never a standalone monument. It was the centerpiece of a ceremonial landscape stretching across several miles, most of which remains unexcavated. 18. The heel stone weighs 30 tons and was never shaped. Every major sarsen stone at Stonehenge shows evidence of deliberate shaping. Surfaces smoothed, edges worked, mortise holes carved with precision. The heel stone is the exception. It stands alone outside the main circle, weighing approximately 30 tons, and it was placed exactly as it was found. Completely unworked, raw, natural. On the summer solstice, the rising sun appears directly above it, framing the stone in light. The builders shaped everything around it with extraordinary precision, then deliberately left this one stone untouched. Whatever the heel stone meant to them, they decided it was perfect exactly as nature made it. 19. The mortise and tenon joints. The horizontal lintel stones sitting atop the sarsen uprights aren't just balanced there. They're locked in place using mortise and tenon joints, the same joinery technique used in fine carpentry. Hollow sockets were carved into the underside of each lintel. Matching protrusions were carved into the tops of the uprights. The stones slot together. Additionally, the lintels are curved to follow the circle's circumference, and they're remarkably level, suggesting they were individually measured, carved, and fitted. This is woodworking logic applied to 25-ton rocks. Whoever designed Stonehenge understood structural engineering well enough to transfer carpentry principles to stone, 4,500 years before the concept had a name. 20. The stones may have been chosen for healing. The blue stones, transported 150 miles from the Preseli Hills in Wales, may have been selected not just for their acoustic properties, but for their supposed healing powers. Excavations co-directed by Tim Darvill of Bournemouth University in 2008 found a significant number of Bronze Age skeletons in the surrounding area showing signs of bone deformities and injuries. People who had traveled long distances based on isotope analysis. The theory: Stonehenge functioned as a prehistoric Lourdes, a place where the sick and injured came seeking miraculous recovery. The blue stones were the medicine. The journey itself was part of the cure. And the monument's acoustic properties, the infrasound, the resonance, may have made the experience feel genuinely supernatural. 21. It took 20 million hours to build. Researchers estimate the total labor investment in Stonehenge at over 20 million person-hours. That figure covers quarrying, transport, shaping, and erection across all construction phases. To put it in perspective, if 1,000 people worked 10-hour days without a single day off, it would take them over 5,400 years to accumulate that many hours. The actual workforce was smaller, the work was seasonal, and it was spread across 1,500 years, which means every generation of builders inherited an unfinished monument from their grandparents and passed it, still unfinished, to their grandchildren. They never saw the completed version, nobody did. 22. The alignment points somewhere we still don't understand. Stonehenge aligns precisely with the summer and winter solstices. That much is established. But researchers have identified additional alignments within the monument's geometry that point not to the sun or the moon, but to specific regions of the sky with no obvious astronomical significance. Some of these alignments correspond to star positions as they appeared thousands of years ago before precession shifted the night sky. Others remain unexplained. The monument encodes more astronomical information than its builders needed for a simple solar calendar, as if they were tracking something else, something that moved on a timescale longer than a human life, longer than a civilization, longer than anything we've yet identified. The stones are still pointing. We just don't know at what.